Yes, his truth is marching on, and I march on today on the Savage Nation, where I've been marching for the truth since 1994. When I first began in radio, I had a very liberal program director on a local station, a very nice man, but he didn't know what a conservative was. He heard about it, but he didn't know what they were. Being in San Francisco, he thought it was a dangerous thing to put a conservative on the radio. And he said to me, "What is a conservative?" And I explained to him, fundamentally, it's a man who believes in his nation, borders, its language, and its culture. And I said, the one difference between myself and your fears, or the big difference, is that I have a strong firewall between my conservative beliefs in America and racism. We don't go there. We don't go over that firewall. Well, I never have. In 22 years, I've never gone through that firewall. And no matter what the left would like to do to me and all those of us who have been fighting so hard for our borders, language, and culture, meaning our national identity, I will not be driven over that firewall and be painted a racist. And so welcome to the Savage Nation. The phone number is 855-400-7282. There's only one question for you today. Who do you blame for the Virginia riots? Oh, there's a lot of blame to go around. Don't think it's on one side only. Who do you blame for the Virginia riots? And by the way, while you're thinking about it, when did nationalism become Nazism? When George Soros decided they should be the same and equated? Who painted nationalism as Nazism? Are we all now Nazis for putting our nation first? Are all those who fought and died for America because they put America first, are they all Nazis now? Are all those crosses in military cemeteries, you know those crosses, are they now the symbols of racism to the internationalists? Should the crosses now be removed, as the ACLU has removed crosses from war memorials? Should every war memorial cross be removed? Should all those of us who want secure borders now apologize to MS-13 and other Hispanic gang members? Should those of us who want English, the national language, the only language on ballots, be driven from our own nation? Should those police who stand up against violent criminals, risking their lives each and every day, should those police hide in shame because the Southern Poverty Law Center and the ACLU legal gangs call them racist when they arrest a non-white criminal? Should we tear down every cross in America because it may offend atheists, witches, and those oh-so-tolerant college professors? Huh? Should the U.S. Constitution be ripped up and discarded because it was created by white men, some of whom were slaveholders? And by the way, should all those Nobel Prizes in medicine and science be returned by all those white male geniuses who gave us much of our advanced civilization because they weren't diverse enough? Huh? Should the monthly calendar be discarded because it does not match that of some Eastern religions? Should Greenwich Mean Time be changed because it is too Eurocentric? Do all of us who love America do so because we hate others or because we put our nation first? These are the questions. Where do we draw the line? And again, I open it up to the Savage Nation, 855-400-7282. I'll make some other main points as the day goes on. I will read you comments by 5 or 6 people who I asked over the weekend their thoughts about the riots in Virginia. People I trust. 4 or 5 of them, and I'll let you then and talk. But I want to make some main points first. Being white and having conservative beliefs does not make you a racist. Of course there are white people who hate minorities. And there are minorities who hate everyone else. That's the human condition. But you see, after 8 years of Obama, the divider, the races were divided even further. Religions were divided even further. Sexes were divided even further. Economic classes were divided even further. Never forget what Obama and Eric Holder did to this nation. You know, they say when you sow the wind, you shall reap the whirlwind. They sowed the wind with hatred for 8 straight years. Not one day in those 8 years did all of the phonies in the media say one word about what Obama was doing. Not one word from the fakers in the media when Eric Holder and Barack Obama were sowing the whirlwind. Not one word. Nationalism does not mean racism. Make it very clear in your head. Nationalism does not mean racism. It means a love of country and what it stands for. Any citizen can be a nationalist regardless of their ethnic background or their ethnic origin. The white supremacists and neo-Nazis who organized this original demonstration are racists and were rightfully discredited by all concerned, including the president. But the left also has violent extremists. Antifa is a domestic terrorist group. Black Lives Matter, in my opinion, is a domestic terrorist group. And others who preach race hatred should also be condemned, but they are not by Wolf Blitzer, Anderson Cooper, and all of the other, arbiters of the truth. President Trump made an initial statement trying to unite the country, and yet he was painted as being sympathetic to the racists for not naming them outright. When did Obama ever name the racists outright? Do you recall the cops who were killed in Dallas by a black member of Black Lives Matter? I'm not allowed to mention it? Well, I'll mention it again and again and again until you understand. Do you remember the Dallas cop killer? Micah Xavier Johnson? He killed cops, do you remember? He executed them with a high-powered rifle. Did Obama condemn him? Johnson told police negotiators during a standoff that he was upset about recent police shootings and wanted to kill white people, especially white officers, the police chief said at the time. His online history showed he visited and liked several websites dedicated to Black Lives Matter. Did Anderson Cooper note that on CNN? Did Wolfie Blitzer the Blinker note that? My friends, Obama invited prominent Black Lives Matter activists right into the White House. That would be the equivalent, in my opinion, of Trump inviting a Ku Klux Klan member with a sheet into the White House. Did anyone on CNN make a note of that? I don't think so. And by the way, while we're at that, what about the other overt supremacist groups that have become so prominent these past years in America? You mean there are only white supremacists? Have you heard of brown supremacists? Yes, there are. They are called La Raza. La Raza means the race in Spanish. Not all races, the race. And Obama invited the head of La Raza into the White House to work there beside him on domestic policy. Was that noted by CNN and MSNBC? Of course not. So, my friends, you need a little context to understand what's going on in this country. Remember the adage, he who sows the wind will reap the whirlwind. Obama sowed the wind for 8 straight years with racial and class division. I warned you several years ago in 2013 with my book, Stop the Coming Civil War. I wrote Stop the Coming Civil War, not Start the Coming Civil War. And I wrote in 2013, according to me, our nation is in real trouble, and the seeds of a second conflagration have been sown. Not between the states, I wrote, but between true patriots who believe in our nation's founding principles and those whose beliefs are working every day to undermine them and change the very nature of the country. Not a war of bullets and blood, I wrote, but one of commitment to freedom and courage of conviction. I believed at the time, and I believe now, that the split between right and left is possibly irreparable. And I wrote, unless we understand what's really happening and how we must act to stop it. I cut my teeth exposing the political left's goals, tactics, and actions as they have been and are attempting to tilt the country's axis even closer to socialism. In this book, Stop the Coming Civil War, I laid out my beliefs about what lefties in our government don't want people to know, connecting the dots between their many frightening moves and raising the not-so-obvious issues they don't want discussed. And I ask these questions then, and you want to know the context of what's going on in the country? Because the questions are still relevant. Why have so many of our top military commanders been summarily pushed aside after years of brave service? Ask Obama why he did it. I ask, is the falsification of records by Veterans Administration personnel in order to cover up the horrific neglect of our brave soldiers a sign of what's to come with Obamacare? I wrote, how is Obama's irresponsible foreign policy not just weakening us in Russia, China, and the Middle East, but actually endangering our security at home as well? And I ask, what does it mean for our freedom and our way of life that negligent immigration law enforcement has allowed illegal aliens to cross the southern border into our country with little fear of penalty. So I wrote Stop the Coming Civil War. I advise you think very carefully about who is responsible for what just happened over the weekend. I invite you to call. The phone number is, 855-400-7282. We could even talk about the statues if you want, because I have a little fact for you about the Robert E. Lee statues. Robert E. Lee himself did not want any statues. Did you know that? Did you know that? Because I studied my history. Those who do not know the history are condemned to repeat it. I know my history, and I'm not condemned to repeat it. I'll leave it to the ignoramuses who said that Robert E. Lee was a racist. He was not a divider, and he was not a racist. He was a West Point graduate, who, by the way, was revered by Abraham Lincoln after the Civil War. I don't know if you know that. And by the way, when you're talking about statues of evil, did you know what the Union Army did to the South as they swept through the South? Do you know that the marks of hatred as they burnt Atlanta to the ground and many other cities? Did you know that the Union Army burned Atlanta to the ground? Did you know that? I don't think you knew that. I don't think the ignoramuses in the media know that. So civil war is a terrible thing. If you look at Syria, you see what civil war brings. It brings murder, torture, death, hatred. That's the last thing this country needs. And we thought by electing Donald Trump we were getting rid of what Obama had done to this nation for 8 straight years. Barack Obama, Al Sharpton, Eric Holder. Don't you remember those horrible years of racism and division? You don't remember those years. As you sow, so shall you reap. Again, I'll be right back on the Savage Nation to take your calls. I want to play the Battle Hymn of the Republic again. Many of you don't even know what it is. I actually sang to this in my elementary school in the Bronx of New York. Did you know it's a Union song? I'll bet many of you think I was playing a racist Southern song. You're so dumb. You hear the song and you think, racism, racism, racism. Look in a mirror, Johnny. The only solution to America's woes is dialogue, not demagoguery. And we're not getting dialogue. The media is stirring up the hatred as much as they can. Never forget that they live off violence. Never forget for 1 minute that if it burns, it earns. Never forget for 1 second that the ratings go up on television if things go up in flames. Never forget that those nice men and women in those clean suits and those white shirts are the true demagogues of our time. Never forget it for 1 second. And never forget what it's like to be white and poor in America. Never forget what it's like to have your race debased every day in a university and in the media. Never forget what it's like if you're a proud man and you're not a racist. It will make you into a racist. If you take a man as he is, you make him worse. Did you hear what I just said to you? You make him worse. Goethe wrote that. If you take a man as he is, you make him worse. If you take a man as he can be, you might make him better. Let's hear from a white nationalist who was at the riots in Charlottesville. Brian he's calling on WABC. Brian, where are you calling from?
I am calling from Philadelphia. I'm on my way home from work. I'm from Philadelphia. I'm a white nationalist. I was at the rally this weekend, and I would like to clear a few things up. First and foremost, the violence was initiated 100% by Antifa and the leftist counter-protesters. They arrived with baseball bats, knives, flamethrower, bricks, bottles, chemical gases, bottles of urine, feces, and other filth, and were basically allowed to attack us despite the fact that we were legally permitted to have a rally. We went through the...
Brian, I think I need to interject at this juncture for 1 moment. I don't think most people listening to this program or listening to the story around the country or around the world understand that the ACLU intervened on behalf of the white nationalists to permit them to march. Is that correct?
That is 100% correct.
So even the most extremist left-wing political organization, the ACLU, went to a federal judge and got permission for this march to occur in that park. But it was the police in that city that let the crowds mingle together, and they hold much of this blame.
Nearly, and it was as if they forced us together. Even when they broke up our rally, the routes that we were told to leave were lined on both sides with people waiting to attack us.
Right. I read this from a Finnish gentleman who came from Finland, who said he didn't want to see a piece of American history erased. I don't even know what his politics are. And he was shocked to see that the police forced all members of the so-called nationalist movement to leave the area, going through a gauntlet of hatred, bricks, bats, stones, feces. The police funneled you through that crowd in order to provoke this violence, is what he said.
That is absolutely what happened. And there's no way anybody with half of a brain that was there that saw it happen can't say honestly that it was done on purpose. They knew, if they knew.
Well, let's cut to the chase. Brian, as a white nationalist, do you condone the driver of the car who drove into the crowd?
Absolutely not. Unless it was a matter of self-defense, absolutely not. And not one person I spoke to went there with the intention to commit any act of violence. That being said, anywhere anybody goes that even promotes being white or any of our interests, collective interests, like any other group is allowed to do, is physically attacked. They have their livelihood taken away from them just for saying, yes, I think white people should have a future in this country. That alone is enough to get anybody attacked or fired.
Did you see the article, Link? Did you see the article this morning on the Drudge Report of a poor guy who worked at a hot dog company here in Berkeley, California, who was seen by social media, just seen at the rally, was fired simply for being at the rally? Did you see that?
Absolutely. And can you tell me, when they were having the Black Lives Matter rallies and they were burning down buildings and attacking any white people in sight, were any of those people fired? Of course not.
We know there's a double standard, and we know that we want this stopped, and we want it stopped now, and nobody wants a civil war in this country. So what is it that you're marching for as a white nationalist? What do you want?
I can only speak for myself, but this seems to be the opinion of most people I spoke to there. First and foremost, white men have a place in the history of this country and should have a place in the future of this country. Second of all, we should not be the piñata for everybody else's gripes. And third of all, if we are going to continue to have the greatest country in the world, let's go back to merit. Do everything on merit. But
thank you. Right. Judge a man by his qualities, not by the color of his skin. Martin Luther King Jr. Wouldn't it be nice to follow that idea?
Join the Savage Nation. Call now, 855-400-SAVAGE. Savage.